My favorite part of dance, I think, is connecting with the audience when you're on stage.
And assert your views, but in a way that respects the fact that other people have other views.
This television series is about creative visions and respect for humanity.
This university, as the flagship institution in the state, trains so many of the leaders of the state of Alabama that we really feel in our department like we have a connection to the people who are going to govern the state, the people who are going to be in important positions, governors, representatives, state legislators, judges, local politicians, people who are going to make a real difference, and that gives us a real sense of responsibility that we take very seriously. I think the first thing you have to understand, this goes back in political science literature to some of the earliest writers in political science in the United States, is you have to understand, first of all, that politicians, like everybody else, want to get their job and they want to keep their job. For a politician, that means getting elected and re-elected. And so it's important that politicians pay attention to what voters want. Now, the problem is that because politicians pay attention to what voters want, they're sometimes afraid to push too far, afraid to take on tough issues, because they know if they do that, that it's possible they may lose their job and lose their chance of getting re-elected. And we criticize them for that. We say, well, why can't you have the institutional courage to do the things that are right, to do the things that John Kennedy wrote about in Profiles in Courage? I think there are limits to what we can expect out of politicians in a system where they have to be elected and re-elected. And by and large, we can expect them to take on the tough issues when we demand it. Not before, but when we demand it. Most of the mainstream media, the newspapers, the television stations, the radio stations, they're in the business of making money. And so they have to do things that are going to draw in the viewers, draw in the readers, and keep them. Unfortunately, that tends to degrade our discourse sometimes. Instead of talking about important issues of human rights, instead of talking about important issues of human development and making society better, we're talking about Michael Jackson. We're talking about the latest scandal here and there, the latest outrage. And that's unfortunately a byproduct of freedom of the press and of having a press that's involved in the business of making money. But even back in the 1960s and early 1970s, you had television news departments that were considered loss leaders. They were expected to lose money. They were expected to, the network was expected to make up the money in their entertainment programming, and the news departments were a source of pride. And so they would do documentaries on important issues. I remember the documentaries about hunger in America, about poverty, about civil rights. Things you would never see today on mainstream television. Maybe you'd see them on CNN late night, but devoting a whole hour to what today would be called a relatively boring or dry coverage of an important issue. It's changed now so that I think that and part of it's the competition. I mean, in all fairness to the 3 networks, for example, there aren't 3 networks anymore. There are 6 networks and 100 cable channels. And the audience they could automatically assume they would have 40 years ago, they can't assume that anymore. They're in constant battle with all the other places that we can go, all the other channels we can click and turn to. And as a result, they don't do that sort of thing as much anymore. They're much more rapid-paced, their sound bites are much smaller, and they cover things that they think are going to be entertaining, they're going to capture your attention, rather than things they think are good for you. One of the big challenges we have is a generation of extremely cynical college students. And I don't blame them for being cynical in the sense that so much negative news has come out over the years and so many politicians have let us down. What the problem is that we end up with a situation where students come into my class and come into other classes and they say, it doesn't matter, they're all crooks. They're all out in it for themselves. Nothing can ever get better through politics. And that's a perception I think we have to fight for 2 reasons. First of all, it's not true. There are plenty of very dedicated, highly moral, extremely public-spirited people at all levels of of government and public service. And those people shouldn't have their reputations besmirched by those people who do betray the public's trust. And the second reason is because the people that we get, the students we get in our classroom, are going to be the next generation of voters. And it's important for us to convey to them that there is a value and a goodness in public service that really demands their attention and demands their respect. And as voters, they shouldn't be thinking about how do I vote for the lesser of two evils, or should I stay home because they're all crooks. They should be thinking about how can I use my power as a citizen, whether it's as a voter, whether it's running for office, whether it's protesting, whatever it is you want to do, how can I use my power as a citizen to make the world a better place than what I came into? Because if you go into public service, you're going to run into all sorts of obstacles. You're going to run into people who are only in it for themselves. You're going to run into politicians who are trying to block you. You're going to run into people who are just kind of playing games back and forth, for whom politics is just sort of a game of gotcha and who's going to win. And you have to endure those people, and you have to not give up, and you have to fight through that. But the rewards of doing that are particularly great.
Dance is often suggested for gymnasts and springboard divers. Greg Louganis studied dance, and a number of other divers studied particularly ballet, because it works on the line of the leg and the feet. And so it just seemed to be a natural progression. You can't really make a living doing gymnastics or springboard diving after you're done with the competition. It satisfies something that's a physical desire, and I think that's one reason that going from athletics into dance, people who want to dance have that desire to be physical. They want to be athletic, but there is more than that. There is a desire to be artistic, to be musical, to be visually artistic, also the theatrical aspect of creating characters. Then you get to express emotions and feelings that the average person on the street doesn't really get a chance to.
My favorite part of dance, I think, is connecting with the audience when you're on stage. I love to look out, and if there are any little girls in the audience, I like to look at them because I was that little girl looking up at them and just idolizing them. So I just really like to connect with them especially.
I think the thing I like about it the most is like everything that goes crazy in my life, like dance is the one thing that's stable and it's always there, it's always going to be there, and I know I can always go back to that, and it's just nice to know I can go to class and forget about everything and have fun. It doesn't matter.
My athletic background has been a big part of my dance because it requires endurance and muscle in order to be able to do certain things in ballet. And I think that it's very important that people that are in ballet realize that it isn't a lovey-dovey, casual dance. It's a very powerful, demanding exercise. And whenever you're in class, whenever you attend a class, whenever you take the stage, it requires elegance, strength, and endurance. So athleticism is very important to the dance.
Yes, doing a duet is difficult because you have to sort of be in tune with your partner, and some days we're more in tune than others. And in this piece, we experimented with improvisation and just feeling each other's weight, which is even more difficult because you can't really verbalize what you want your partner to do. And from that, we set into choreography those things that we liked, and the things we didn't like, we just sort of scratched it.
It's a challenge to do any sort of dance with another person because you're not totally in control of everything you're doing, but we've worked together really well, and I've enjoyed it a lot. The challenge has been good.
I love working with Jay. I guess I do. It's really interesting because, especially for this piece, we had to work off of each other's weight and just like feel each other, and that was really difficult because, like he said, there was a lack of communication because when you're moving, you can't tell the other person what you're about to do.
As a dancer, we're much more liberal and more democratic, and we're into humanities, and we don't see people's color, we just see their personality. And I think even though we are on a University of Alabama campus, which, you know, deep south, but just here, we love everyone, and it doesn't matter color.
Being an African American in the dance world, I feel as though no one has treated me any differently from anyone else. I've enjoyed it for my entire career, 4.5 years, and I think that this day and age, race and ethnic background or orientation are completely irrelevant to the process of dance.
Think of the things that people went through during the civil rights movement. I mean, that was really a sense of citizenship and purpose and sacrifice, the like of which we're really not called on to do so much these days. And if we can look back at what they did and what they sacrificed and what they risked and what they endured and the enormous success they ultimately had, you know, that should certainly be an inspiration to everybody. And you know, anybody who says politics doesn't count and politics doesn't matter, well, you can't go back and read the history of civil rights in Alabama and across the country and tell me that the actions of individual citizens exercising their rights of citizenship against the powers that be, against public opinion, you know, you can't tell me that that doesn't matter, because that obviously mattered. It mattered in a very big way. It continues to matter today. If you look at some of the awful things that were said about Thomas Jefferson, about John Adams, about Abraham Lincoln, the fact that the former Vice President of the United States shot and killed the former Secretary of the Treasury, that would be Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. So as bad as things may look today, and they can be, and the cost of becoming involved in politics and having your enemies break out the briefing books and finding out all the dirt they can on you, and that's got to be a real impediment for people going into politics, which is a shame. It's kind of always been there. And in some ways, in the old days of yellow journalism and the truly partisan press and some of the nastiness that took place at the Revolutionary period, just before the Civil War, I mean, there was I think it was a U.S. Senator who was beaten to unconsciousness with a cane on the floor in Congress. He was a supporter of abolition, an opponent of slavery, and he was beaten, I believe, by a fellow member of Congress. So, as bad as things may look today, there is, not just in the United States, but in all democracies, a history of politics getting personal, and it's something that I hope students can be persuaded to overcome. You have these shows that are just screen fests, where they truly are simply for fans. They don't provide any useful information. You don't learn anything. If you're a fan, you get to cheer for your side, you get to boo the other side, and that's what it's come down to. I mean, I think you know, Jon Stewart when he went to Crossfire, just before Crossfire got canceled, and he said, "You guys are hurting America." I think that's really the type of thing he was talking about, that instead of politics being an exploration of ideas and an exploration of alternatives and a place where reasonable people can disagree about things that matter a great deal, it becomes a food fight. And nobody gets anything out of it. Certainly every party has an incentive to try to borrow whatever good ideas the other party has, and certainly anything that works they want to use because they want to bring in the voters. Yes. And it can be tough sometimes because you can be ignored. You can be shouted down. But you're going to be listened to ultimately as long as you're sincere, as long as you have good ideas, as long as you bring them respectfully to the political arena. And I say respectfully, I don't mean in a cowardly way. I mean, feel free to assert yourself and assert your views, but in a way that respects the fact that other people have other views. I think that's really the most important thing that people can do now in this very supercharged political atmosphere we have is have the courage of your convictions, but also understand the people who disagree with you, they disagree with you. They're not bad people, they're not the enemy, they just disagree with you. But by all means, take advantage of your citizenship rights, because that's really the only way as a country that we can continue to thrive. If you have any questions about political science, if you want to know about the political science department, if you want to find out what opportunities are available as an undergraduate student in political science, as a graduate student, we have a bachelor's program, of course. We have a master's program in public administration, which teaches people to serve the public as city managers on the local level and the statewide level. And we have a PhD program. And if you have any questions about that, I hope you'll contact me personally. My phone number is 205-348-5981, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions you have about our program, about political science, or anything else that I can help you with.
We need to respect the creativity of everyone. Another unique aspect of this television series is we give the films that we shoot and create back to the organizations. What better way to show respect for their own creativity? When there was no television series out there that showed respect for everyone, for all the organizations, for all creative visions that exist, one needed to exist.